What's up, everybody? It's Joe with J Blake Photo. It's an exciting day. Canon just announced this morning the new Canon EOS R5 and R6 cameras, as well as a myriad of new RF lenses. Looks like a lot of the leaks were absolutely accurate, so I'm really glad that we were able to talk about a lot of those specs and features in some of my previous videos. If you haven't seen those, go ahead and check those out. But in today's video, I do want to talk about some of the things that maybe weren't in the leaks and really weren't highlighted in the announcements. Some things that I've found in digging through the specs of these cameras and some of the thoughts that I have about what it means for these cameras in the future. Now, first things first, before we jump into this video, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, go ahead and hit the bell so that YouTube lets you know when I post a new video, and go ahead and hit the like button. That really helps me, it helps the channel, and it lets YouTube know that it should send other people my way. For those of you who don't know, I actually do a lot more than just these news, leak, and review videos. I actually do a decent amount of reviews and how-tos and other photography type stuff. Go ahead and check out some of my back catalog. I just posted a video on Final Cut Pro and editing with Final Cut Pro, speeding up your workflow. Go ahead and check that out if you're a Final Cut editor, or let me know down in the comments what kind of videos you are looking for. Anyway, those videos don't get a lot of attention. All right, so let's take a look at these cameras. Let's really dig deep. The Canon EOS R5, first of all, is absolutely what we thought it would be. It is a market leader in its respective area, you know, in the $38.99 US dollar range. It's a little more expensive than its counterparts, mainly the Sony A7R4, the Nikon Z7, and to some extent, the Panasonic S1R. So those are all $3,400 to $3,700 cameras. So they're all in similar price ranges. They've all got those, 40-ish megapixel sensors, except for the Sony that now has that new 61 megapixel sensor, but they're all about in the same bracket in terms of the same people who would be buying those cameras are going to be in the market potentially for the R5. And we had pretty much guessed that this was going to be a 45 megapixel camera. We knew it was going to be coming with 8K RAW, that it would be recording all that internally. We knew it was going to have a CFast card. We knew that it was going to have an SD card slot. A lot of that information had already been leaked, and we knew that it was going to have 12 frames per second with a mechanical shutter, 20 frames per second electronic. Those are all kind of now what we would consider standards for the EOS R series that's out in 2020. So there were still a handful of things, though, that I was surprised by out of this camera. Most notably was the improved EVF with 120 Hertz refresh. That's also, I think, double the resolution of the EOS R. The fact that there's going to be a lot of different options on the 4K recording side, including be able to record 4K 30, 4K 60, 4K 120, or a 4K 30 mode that is actually downsampled 8K. They didn't scrimp. Honestly, that's why, while I'm not surprised, I'm really glad that the price is where it is. I've seen a lot of people complain that it's $38.99, whereas the 5D Mark IV was $36.99, $34.99. And considering I would say the leap forward in technology that we're seeing out of this camera, I'm not shocked that we're seeing a slightly higher price, and I think it is going to be worth the increase in price. I would say that looking over the specs and looking over all the released information, this camera is going to be phenomenal. This is definitely going to be a watershed moment in digital photography and videography and the DSLR mirrorless world. This is, I think, really the beginning of a new era, a new level of camera tech. I guess I wasn't surprised by this, but I was happy to see it. In the specifications is that both the EOS R5 and the R6 are getting an intervalometer. I loved the fact that the 6D Mark II had a built-in intervalometer, and that it allowed you both to shoot individual shots, which then you could import into Lightroom and apply effects to before you put it into a movie for some really cool looking time lapses, or you could do a time-lapse video. The EOS R only allowed you to do the time-lapse video, which was kind of disappointing. Glad to see that the intervalometer is coming back to the built-in features of the Canon cameras. And of course, I'm glad to see in both cameras, the R5 and the R6, the fact that we're getting full Canon log 10-bit 422 across all video modes, and really nice. And this is just going to sound weird, but they added auto ISO to the Canon log profile. If you're a shooter of the EOS R and you're shooting in Canon log, which I'm shooting in log right now, the ISO is normally set at a base of 400, and you can adjust it, but you can't set it to auto. It's either 100, 200, 400, whatever. And they're actually going to let the ISO float. So that is a feature that I was very excited. I don't know, it's dumb, but I was very excited to see that. And for anybody who didn't see it, the bit rate on the Canon log for the EOS R5 for 4K is 1000 megabits per second. That is nuts. All right, so those are the things that I was very excited to see on the EOS R5 announcement. Again, a lot of that was buried in some of the white paper technical documents that Canon released on this camera, comparing the EOS R5, the R, and the R6. So now, looking at the R6, again, the specs from the leaks were pretty much dead on. 20 megapixel sensor, probably borrowed directly from the 1DX Mark III, which means that we've got some great low light performance and excellent speed. It's got that Digic X processor from the 1DX Mark III, so we're still getting that 12 frame per second mechanical shutter speed and 20 frames per second electronic shutter, although it is a fast polling sensor, so the hope is that they'll be able to reduce, rolling shutter and all that sort of stuff. 4K up to 60 frames per second, and 1080p at 120 frames per second, and of course all the other frame rates underneath that. So, very close to all of the leaks that we saw about the specs. Here's where things get a little dicey on the EOS R6. And I'm not trying to bag on this camera. I actually think that this camera really looks great. And I also understand that there are times where, we can't get everything we want. But I can tell you that there are a handful of things that I was just a little disappointed about. And those things might keep me from getting this camera. And I'll tell you what they are. So number one, the 4K 60 is cropped, although it is minimal. It's a 1.07 crop. It's the same crop that you actually see on the 1DX Mark III in 4K 60. And that has to do with, the fact that it's a DCI ratio, and then it crops in just a little bit. I think it's something like 95 or 97% of the frame width is used. So it's not a lot, but it's there. It's small, but it's there. I don't anticipate that being the difference between whether or not your shot works or it doesn't, but it is absolutely there. Next, and this one was a real bummer to see, to be honest, is the fact that all of the video modes on the Canon EOS R6 are IPB compression, which means that there is significantly more interframe compression versus intra-frame compression with all-I. And all-I options are available for all of the shooting modes on the EOS R5. The R6, however, every shooting mode is stuck with IPB. If you remember the 60 Mark II when it came out, one of the biggest knocks on it was the fact that, number one, it didn't shoot 4K, but even in its 1080p 60 mode, it shot in IPB, which was just a bummer. And that IPB really it reduces the quality of the video. Now, I know that once you end up editing that and, compressing it and then uploading it to YouTube, you're not going to realize all the potential clarity out of an all-I compression. But when you start as bright and as sharp as possible, you end up with a better image. I can tell you that shooting 1080p on the EOS R here versus the 60 Mark II was a significant improvement in quality. And I attribute part of that to the fact that it's shooting in all-I versus IPB. Now, it's got the same 3.69 million dot EVF as the R, but it has that 120 hertz refresh rate from the R5, which is really nice. That's great to see. Except the vari-angle screen, it's the same size. It's still 3-inch, same as the R, but not as big as the R5, which is a 3.2-inch. It's just slightly bigger. But the R6 is a 1.7 megapixel display, whereas it's a 2.3 megapixel display on the R. So it's actually less densely packed than the R. It's a lower resolution screen than the EOS R. Now, of course, with that lower megapixel sensor, you got bigger pixels. It's going to have great dynamic range. It's going to have great low light performance, and the ISO range is higher than even in the EOS R5. And it's got those dual UHS-2 slots. It's got 100% autofocus coverage. It's got the same dual pixel autofocus 2 coming out of Canon, same as in the R5. Same number of AF points and zones as the R5. And it is shooting still Canon log 10-bit 422 in HEVC, right? H256 or 265. But it is all eye compression, so it's going to be more compressed. And then lastly, the other thing that was kind of disappointing was the bit rates. And tell me down in the comments if you think this is a compression issue, because I've been trying to do the math, right? So I mentioned that the R5 has in 4K, it'll do up to 1,000 megabits per second. That's in DCI. In UHD 4K, it is I think 960. It's 940 megabits per second, which is crazy high. The EOS R, when it was announced, was touted as having this like amazing bitrate because it has 480 megabit per second 4K, and it is great. The video quality out of it is really amazing, even though it does have that really intense crop. The 6D, or I'm sorry, the R6 has 230 megabits per second. And then going up to 340 in log, so it does up the rate just a little bit, but still considerably less than a 480 that's coming out of the EOS R. So my thought is that even though it's cropped, is the video signal coming out of the R actually going to be better than what's coming out of the R6? Think about it. A higher bit rate, and it doesn't have the IPB compression. It's all eye. I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see the comparison to know for sure. Again, I know the crop is there, and that's a big hindrance, but imagine the crop wasn't the issue. Imagine you were able to get around the crop and you're just looking at just video quality straight in Canon log, 480 megabits, all eye compression versus 340 megabits IPB compression. What do you think? Now, internal 10-bit 422 versus internal 8-bit, but then you could hook up an external recorder and get the 422 10-bit, which you can't do. Like, it doesn't get any better if you hook up the external recorder onto the EOS R6, or at least it doesn't seem like it would be. So again, I'm not trying to bag on this camera. It seems really great. There's some really amazing things in here for the price. And when you compare it to the other cameras in the R6 kind of area, in terms of what it would be competing against, we're talking about, the 24 megapixel Z6, the Panasonic S1, and the Sony A7 III. And specifically with the A7 is the fact that, that's a 24 megapixel camera. It's about $500 less. It has 5-axis sensor stabilization, shoots at 10 frames per second. The EVF and the screen are not as good, that's for sure. And while it shoots in log profile or HLG, it's 8-bit, not 10-bit. And it also doesn't have 4K 60. So there's trade-offs there. I was just really bummed about the IPB thing. And also the fact that it doesn't have GPS. Am I the only person out there that loved the GPS that was built into the 6D Mark II? I love opening up the map view in Lightroom or importing my photos into Apple Photos and having it retain the map. I love that. I think it's so cool. I love looking at areas that I've shot in and seeing photos that I've shot at different times, but at the same area, the same location. I've gone back to lots of shooting locations, and I love seeing the different shots that I've gotten from those places. Or, there's one or two places really near my home that I've shot countless times, and I just love seeing them all grouped together. It's fun. I know I could add the geotag stuff later, but still, it's nice. So I really do think that this camera, the R5, is a This is a monumental release. This is huge. And the R6 is a great companion camera. I'm super excited that we're basically getting all the components of a 1DX Mark III, right? The sensor, the chip, the speed, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of those features in a camera that costs less than half as much. That's, I mean, right off the bat, that's amazing. I just wish that compression wasn't, honestly, if the compression was all the rest of it I could probably be okay with. But that was just that one thing that I was like, oh. And then combine that with the reduced bit rate, and I don't know. But you tell me, you know, is the bit rate going to matter for you? Is the compression going to matter for you for what you're doing? Is that really something that you're going to worry about? Let me know down in the comments. And it looks like we're going to be getting the R5 at the end of this month and the R6 at the end of next month. So we'll be getting them soon. We'll see what stock looks like. We'll see how many they can make and whether or not they can meet demand. I'm assuming that these things are going to fly off the shelves. So thanks for listening to me late at night on a Thursday as I rant about new cameras. Go ahead and find me over on Instagram. I am at jblakePhoto. Go ahead and hit subscribe, like, all that good stuff. Hit the bell. And again, if you're interested in photography and interested in things more than just me ranting or talking about specs and leaks and new stuff, check out some of the other videos on my channel. I've got some, I think, some great videos about some of the travels that I've done, some of the hikes, and some of the fun stuff, as well as some how-tos on editing and using some other gadgets and stuff. So check those out and let me know what you think down in the comments. Or if there's something maybe you'd like to see, let me know. And I'll see you in the next one.